had set off with the intention of joining in a feast. If the eagles flew, then Louis, daughter of Firun, the grim god of winter, would bring them luck. This had been their hope. But instead of luck, they had encountered death. 25 of them had set off, led by warrior Bernhard, to keep watch on the hill in the Forest of Witch. But cruel fate had struck them down, one and all. Really, all of them. Nay, for Ulrich was still alive. Only now he had been surrounded by his friends. In a daze, he remembered their screams. He remembered the arrows and the dying, the blow that had extinguished all the horror around him, only for him to awaken to a nightmare. Were they really all dead? All his friends? His sisters in arms? Ulrich peered down at Firul. No, impossible. They had defied so many daggers together. Look, his brother in battle was alive. Firul had once again escaped from the claws of Boron. The gods had not completely abandoned them. They would fight their way through to the revelers and then to the Tower of Falcons in the east. Then, a trembling hand in this field of death was raised, armored and yet not protected enough. It was Bernhard, their leader, the secret poet and fearless warrior. Ulrich ran to him, seized with a sudden hope that he could save Bernhard. Go west. The quivering words were gasped through the trembling lips. You must go west, to the Tower of Oak. Ulrich wanted to hold him. Conserving his strength was what Bernhard needed. But already their leader's voice had faltered and failed. Only his eyes were still speaking. Ulrich held the map of the lost towers in his hands, those places where the hidden supplies of timber were stored for the beacons that were to warn the Darkenguard of the approaching orcs. A last order was given, sealed with a final breath. It was over. The route would not now lead to behind the protective walls. Instead, it would go west into the heart of the enemy. Ulrich looked around. There were more companions who had escaped death, but now they would only be running towards it again. Wolfberg, the shield brother of the captain, who refused to believe that the heroic heart of his brother was no longer beating. Gerbrand, struggling manfully to stay on his feet. The bald-pated Orm, with whom he had so often traversed the forests. Golgari had shown them mercy, had not carried them to the kingdom of the dead, his black wings beating. And yet fate was mocking them now, for their route was westward, to confront the orcs. They were to cross through the forest, hostile territory, a trap of densely packed trees, malevolent undergrowth and steep slopes, perfectly designed for ambushes. Keeping their eyes peeled for giveaway shadows, Ulrich and his companions moved towards the ruin where they intended to light the beacon. The flames that promised both warning and protection to the borders of Wiedenan lands. Hunger and pain were a distant afterthought to be forgotten for now. They stilled their thirst with the little water that they carried with them. The arrow hit as suddenly as Rondra's thunderbolt. ripped through Firul's oh-so-loyal good fortune, and ending his dreams, his plans for a time after the orcs. Peace, a small farm. Helpless, Ulrich could do nothing but leave his brother-in-arms behind, to sacrifice him to the task that was driving them all forward, the beacon. The companions fled far from the dying man, swearing eternal vengeance upon the coal pelts that were harrying them, until they had almost traversed the forest of Witch. Night fell. In the cold light of the moon, the unequal hunt extracted its toll. Gerbrand, who had already been exhausted by the battle, struggled to draw breath with his weakened lungs. What remained was no more than the faintest of smiles on the face of his friend. Angrist heard a noise in the darkness. Was it his companions? Who had noticed that he and Gerbrand had been falling further and further behind? The light of his torch would guide his friends to them, or lure the enemy. They had to be found. Their companions must find them. They would never abandon them, surely. A rattling wheeze caused Angrist to look around. Gerbrand was dead. He was now gazing at a world beyond this one. Gently, he closed the eyelids of his friend. A noise! Angrist steeled his heart and turned around. It wasn't Ulrich and the others stepping out from the shadows of the trees. It was their orcish pursuers. His courage failed him. He was surrounded by the enemy. Escape was impossible. A paralyzing weariness overcame him. He fell to his knees. With eyes closed, he awaited Boron's merciful embrace. Rondra! It echoed as steel clashed with steel. For the Middle Realm! Like a pack of ravenous wolves, Ulrich and the others fell upon the orcs, who only now had been so sure of their plunder. The fierce song of war echoed among the trees, the smell of spent blood filling the air. The battle raged this way and that, and yet the brothers in arms held firm. Their thirst for revenge and the call of duty filled the hearts of the warriors. But too great was the might of the orcs. The protective circle of blades was sundered. Each fought on their own now. And again they heard the beating wings of Golgari, that bird of death that carries the souls of the living to the other world. And on they fought, straining and giving their all to help their companions. Then Elwin saw the axe aiming for Ulrich's back. He didn't hesitate, hurled himself at the malevolent blow, and Golgari found his soul to take it away. His sacrifice could not have been in vain. This thought stiffened the resolve of the champions, strengthened their weapon arms, fueled the battle fire within their hearts. Victory was essential. Only if the beacon warned of the danger would their loved ones have the time they needed to flee and seek refuge behind the castle walls. Then, finally, the last of the orcs fell to the ground. The way through the forest was free. The ruin, with its oil-soaked timbers for the beacon, was close, so close. Yet the enemy was faster than they were. Bereft of strength, they sought refuge from the vigilant eyes of the enemy. All hope seemed lost. Then Wolfbert raised his voice.
Fires and light in the sky, we are the bane of the dark. Rondra, redeem our prayer, take our side, for we are the God.
Warriors, rise up! We're the Darkenguard! Be the light at the end of all!
with renewed belief and ready for their task to warn those they loved of the enemy. The companions stormed forward, giving of their best, forward with axe and spear, forward into perdition. They had to ignite the fire. Nothing else mattered as steel cut into flesh. And the killing began. Quickly, their excessive courage was transformed into grim perseverance, and then into sober and grim recognition. They were too few, the enemy too many. One of them had to break through. The others would have to sacrifice their lives to buy the necessary time. They fell to the ground, body after body, the praise of Rondra loud on their lips. Ulrich ran forth, the burning torch, the hope of Wiedenan lands in his grasp. Then the blow hit him. The torch fell from his weakened hands. His final thought, they had failed. Or was it he who had failed? There would be no warning light illuminating the night. Instead, the innocent would be massacred, cursing as they died those whom they had placed their faith in, those whose eyes should have been watchful. As the orcs began to howl their victory, Angrist moved. Covered in the blood of his friends, the cold pelts had left him for dead. And it was not only the blood of others. Scorn and frustration beyond measure kindled the last sparks of life in the blazing flame. It could not have all been in vain. Looking certain death in the eye, he bided his time, waited for the right moment. The orcs celebrating with abandon their victory too soon. He began to sprint to the prostrate Ulrich, to the torch that was yet still burning. His determined fingers gripped the torch, begging the goddess of war one last time to fill his arm with strength. He hurled the torch, straining his muscles to their utmost with all his remaining strength. It was done. Steel sliced into his flesh. Now he would follow Ulrich. His dying eyes caught sight of a glimmer, then a combustion, transmitting its message to the ever-keen eyes of the warriors on the towers of the watchful gloom. Was Golgari there? The bird of death, was it he who was lifting him up into the heavens, revealing to his dying senses in a final moment of godly mercy that their sacrifice had not been in vain? The tower of Falcon's stronghold, the mighty seat of Squiress Utharia, their signal had been seen. The beacon flared to life. It would leap to the next tower and then to the next. The border had been warned. Those who could walk would flee to the castle. Not everyone would see their beloved approaching, but they had bought precious time for the Darkenguard. Time for a living wall to assemble on the Chemin de Ronze, armed and girded, with polished steel in their readied hands. Their oaths remained unbroken. Rondra would proudly await them in her